My employer fired me 1 year before my pension, so now I shut down their $40 million cash machine. They laid me off 1 year before my pension vested. It is just business. I smiled. Okay. I went home and filed a cease and desist. They forgot I owned the patent for the machine that makes their best-selling product. Production stopped instantly. So, my employer of 22 years decided to cut me loose exactly 12 months before my pension would fully vest. The chief financial officer told me it was just business. I smiled, shook his hand, and went home. Then I reminded them that the machine generating 40% of their annual revenue runs on a patent I never signed over. Production stopped that same week. Buckle up because this one is a slow burn with a satisfying finish. I am Kevin, 54 years old, and I spent over 2 decades as a senior mechanical engineer at Hartwell Manufacturing. We made industrial packaging equipment, the kind of heavy machinery that fills, seals, and labels products for companies you have definitely heard of. Food products, cleaning supplies, pharmaceutical containers. If it came in a bottle or a box and rolled off an assembly line somewhere in the Midwest, there was a decent chance Hartwell equipment touched it at some point. I started there at 32 after spending my 20s bouncing between smaller engineering firms that kept going under or getting acquired. Hartwell was different. Family-owned for 3 generations, good benefits, a pension plan that actually meant something. The kind of place where you could build a career instead of just collecting paychecks until the next layoff notice. The Davenport family had owned Hartwell since 1962. Walter Davenport founded it. His son Richard expanded it. Richard's daughter Patricia was running things when I joined in 2002. Good people who understood that manufacturing success came from keeping skilled workers around long enough to actually learn the business. Revolutionary concept these days, apparently. And I did build something there. Not just a career, an actual machine. Back in 2009, Hartwell was struggling. The recession hit manufacturing hard and our main product line was getting crushed by cheaper overseas competitors. The old sealing systems we had been selling for decades were reliable but slow. Clients wanted faster throughput without sacrificing quality. Our existing designs could not deliver that without major compromises. I remember sitting in the weekly engineering meeting that February, watching Patricia Davenport explain the situation. Orders down 32%. 2 major clients had already moved to competitors. A third was shopping around. If we did not find a way to differentiate ourselves, Hartwell might not survive another 2 years. That night, I went home and started sketching. Not for the company, not officially, just because I could not stop thinking about the problem. There had to be a way to increase sealing speed without sacrificing precision. Every existing approach tried to solve it by making the mechanisms faster, but faster meant more heat, more wear, more variability, the wrong direction entirely. I spent 18 months in my garage workshop developing a different solution. Nights after dinner when my wife was watching her shows. Weekends when my buddies were fishing or watching games. Vacation days I never actually took vacation on. I designed a rotary sealing mechanism that could process containers 40% faster than anything else on the market, while maintaining the precision tolerances our clients demanded. The key innovation was a variable pressure cam system that automatically adjusted based on container material and thickness. Instead of running the mechanism faster, I made it smarter. The machine read each container in real time and calibrated its pressure accordingly. Glass bottles, plastic containers, aluminum cans, it did not matter. The system adapted on the fly. Sounds simple when I describe it now, but at the time it was genuinely novel engineering. I built 3 prototype iterations before the design stabilized. Burned through about $23,000 of my own money on materials, machining costs, and testing equipment. My wife thought I was losing my mind. Maybe I was, but I knew there was something there. Here is the important part. I developed this on my own time, using my own equipment, with my own money. My employment contract at the time had the standard intellectual property clause covering work done during company hours or using company resources. But I was careful, obsessively careful. Every component was purchased with personal funds from my own checking account. Every hour of development happened outside of work. I kept receipts, time logs, and dated photographs of my garage workshop progress. Even had my neighbor witness and sign some of the documentation just to have a third party who could verify the timeline. Paranoid, absolutely, but I had seen what happened to engineers who invented things on company time. The company owned everything. The inventor got a plaque and maybe a small bonus. I wanted something different if this actually worked. When I brought the concept to Hartwell's leadership in late 2009, they were interested but skeptical. The company was hemorrhaging money. They did not have capital to invest in unproven technology. Patricia Davenport liked the idea, But her chief financial officer at the time kept shaking his head about the development costs and timeline to market. So I made them a deal. I would license the patent to Hartwell exclusively for manufacturing and sales. In exchange, I would receive a 3% royalty on every unit sold that incorporated my sealing mechanism. The agreement was clear. I retained full ownership of the patent. Hartwell got exclusive rights to manufacture and sell equipment using the design, but only as long as the licensing agreement remained active. The lawyers reviewed everything. Both sides signed. United States Patent Number 8234567 was registered in my name. The Hartwell RS400 rotary sealing system launched in 2011. It saved the company. Within 3 years, the RS400 became Hartwell's flagship product. The speed and precision advantages were exactly what the market wanted. Manufacturing clients were under constant pressure to increase output without increasing costs. My machine let them do exactly that. We went from struggling regional manufacturer to industry leader. Orders came in from across the country, then internationally. Hartwell opened a second production facility just to keep up with demand. The machine I designed in my garage was now generating roughly 40% of total company revenue. My royalty checks were substantial, not retirement on a yacht money, but enough to pay off my house and build a comfortable cushion. My wife stopped thinking I was crazy, started thinking I was clever instead. That felt pretty good. More importantly, I was valued at the company, promoted to senior engineer within 2 years of the RS400 launch, given my own development team to work on improvements and next-generation designs, consulted on every major product decision. When clients came for facility tours, Patricia Davenport always introduced me personally, the guy who saved Hartwell, the guy who built the machine for 15 years. That is who I was. The company treated me well. I treated them well back. The relationship worked. Then the Davenport family sold the company. It happened fast. Patricia was approaching 70 and her children had no interest in manufacturing. The third-generation owners decided they wanted out. Private equity came calling with an offer too good to refuse. Some firm out of Chicago with a name that sounded like it was generated by a random word algorithm. By spring of last year, Hartwell Manufacturing was owned by Granite Peak Capital Partners. I knew what private equity meant. Everyone who has worked in manufacturing knows. They buy companies, squeeze out costs, and flip them within 5 years. The employees who built the value get discarded as operational inefficiencies. The new owners extract the wealth and move on to the next target. But I thought I was safe. I was essential. I held the patent on their most profitable product. My licensing agreement was ironclad. They could not touch me. I had been careful back in 2009. That careful was supposed to protect me now. Turns out I was half right. The new leadership arrived within weeks of the acquisition closing. A chief executive officer named William Ashford, who had never worked in manufacturing before, but had a master of business administration from somewhere impressive and a reputation for aggressive cost reduction. The guy looked like he had stepped out of a business magazine cover. Perfect suit, perfect haircut, perfect smile that never reached his eyes. His chief financial officer was Douglas Brennan, mid-40s, former consulting background. Looked at spreadsheets the way a surgeon looks at a patient on the table, identifying what to cut. Every conversation with Douglas felt like an efficiency audit. He would ask about headcount numbers while you were trying to explain technical processes. Completely missed the point every single time. And they brought consultants, a whole team of them. Young people in expensive clothes who walked through our facilities with clipboards, asking questions about staffing levels and operational efficiency. They would stop at workstations, watch people for a few minutes, make notes. Nobody ever explained what they were evaluating. That was the point. Keep everyone nervous. Nervous people do not complain. The first 6 months under Granite Peak ownership were uncomfortable but manageable. Layoffs started in the support department. Administrative staff first, then some middle management. Janice from accounting, who had been there almost as long as me, got a severance package in 2 weeks to clean out her desk. The guy who managed our warehouse operations for 15 years was replaced by someone younger and cheaper. The consultants kept circling the engineering division, but had not made any moves yet. We were too valuable to cut carelessly. The RS400 was still the cash cow. You do not fire the people who understand how the cash cow works. I kept my head down, did my job, hoped the storm would pass, collected my royalty checks, and tried not to think about what was coming. Then came the pension review. Granite Peak's financial team did a deep audit of all employee benefits. What they found was that Hartwell's legacy pension plan was significantly underfunded relative to the company's current obligations. The Davenport family had been making up the difference through operating profits year after year, but that approach did not align with Granite Peak's cost structure. They wanted to maximize short-term value for eventual resale. pension obligations worked against that goal. Their solution was elegant from a spreadsheet perspective. Any employee within 18 months of pension vesting would be offered an early retirement package. Those who declined would be transitioned to a 401k match program instead. The company would no longer guarantee defined benefit pensions for new enrollments. I was 21 years into my employment. The pension vested at 22 years, 12 months away from locking in benefits I had been earning for over 2 decades. The numbers were not small. Full vesting meant about $4,200 per month for life starting at age 62, plus health insurance subsidies, plus survivor benefits for my wife if I died first. Total lifetime value, somewhere around $1.2 million, depending on how long I lived. 12 months short and I would get nothing, just a 401k balance that was a fraction of what I had been promised. The meeting with Douglas Brennan happened on a Tuesday afternoon in March. His office had been the old conference room before the acquisition. Now it had frosted glass walls and furniture that cost more than most of our assembly line workers made in a month. There was art on the walls, abstract stuff, the kind of art that exists so people know you can afford art. Douglas was sitting behind his desk when I arrived, not standing to greet me, not coming around to shake hands like Patricia Davenport always did, just sitting there with papers arranged in front of him like props. "Kevin, thanks for coming in." He gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Coffee?" I declined, sat down, waited. I had learned over the years that silence made people uncomfortable. People who are uncomfortable talk more than they should. Douglas shuffled his papers. Important papers, apparently. He wanted me to see how many important papers he had. "I'm going to be direct with you because I respect your tenure here. We are restructuring the engineering division. Your position is being eliminated effective 30 days from now." I did not react, just sat there processing, kept my face neutral. Years of engineering had taught me that the first response is rarely the best response. Collect data first, react later. Douglas took my silence as an invitation to continue. "You will receive a severance package equal to 6 months' salary plus any accrued paid time off. Your health insurance will continue through Consolidated Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act for 18 months at subsidized rates. It is a competitive package given current market conditions." I still had not said anything. Douglas seemed uncomfortable with the silence, shifted in his expensive chair, adjusted his expensive cufflinks. "Look, Kevin, I understand you are close to pension vesting. Unfortunately, the restructuring timeline does not accommodate individual circumstances. It is just business. Do not take it personally." The words hung there. Just business. Do not take it personally. 2 phrases that always mean exactly the opposite of what they claim. I nodded slowly. Just business. Exactly. He looked relieved that I seemed to be taking it well. "We appreciate everything you have contributed over the years. Hartwell would not be where it is today without your innovations." "You mean the RS400? Among other things, yes, that product line has been tremendously valuable." His tone was practiced, smooth, like he had rehearsed this conversation in front of a mirror. I stood up. Douglas extended his hand for a goodbye shake, a gesture meant to signal that this was amicable, professional. Just 2 businessmen concluding a transaction. I took his hand, shook it firmly, smiled. "Okay," I said. No argument, no threats, no emotional outburst, just acceptance. Douglas looked surprised, actually surprised. His rehearsed expression slipped for just a second. I expected more pushback. Honestly, some of the other senior staff have been quite emotional about the transition. I kept smiling. Would pushback change anything? No. Unfortunately, the decision is final. Then I will save my energy. Thanks for the conversation, Douglas. I walked out of his office. Kept my pace steady. Did not hurry. Did not hesitate. Collected my personal items from my desk while my coworkers watched with that awkward sympathy. People show when they are relieved it was not them. Tom from my engineering team stopped by my desk while I was packing. His face was pale. "Kevin, I just heard. This is insane. You built this place." I shrugged. Apparently that does not matter anymore. "What are you going to do?" "Go home. Figure things out. Do not worry about me, Tom. You have got your own situation to manage." He nodded slowly, still looked sick about it. Good kid. Would probably be next on the chopping block. I handed my badge to security at the front desk, walked to my car, sat in the driver's seat for exactly 3 minutes collecting my thoughts. Then I drove home. My wife was in the kitchen when I walked in. Saw my face before I said anything. "They did it," she said, not a question. "Yep, 30 days, just business. Do not take it personally." She did not say anything, just came over and hugged me. We stood there for 1 minute, then she stepped back and looked at me with that expression she gets when she is thinking 3 moves ahead. What is the plan? I smiled. The same smile I had given Douglas Brennan. I'm going to make a phone call. Sandra Mitchell had been my intellectual property attorney since I filed the original patent in 2009. She was in her early 60s now, semi-retired, only took cases that interested her. Mine had always interested her. Something about an engineer who had actually planned ahead for once. Sandra, it is Kevin. They just laid me off. I heard her chair creak through the phone. She was probably in her home office working on something else. Not anymore. When? Today. Effective in 30 days, 1 year before my pension vests. There was a pause, a long one. I could almost hear her mind working through the implications. Sandra had a particular way of processing problems, methodical, thorough. The same traits that made her a good patent attorney made her dangerous in negotiations. Kevin, she said carefully, have you reviewed your licensing agreement recently? Not in a few years. Why? Because there is a termination clause. Section 12, paragraph 3. If either party materially breaches the spirit of the business relationship, the other party may terminate the licensing agreement with 30 days written notice. I remembered that clause. We had included it as protection against Hartwell selling the company to someone who might try to exploit the technology inappropriately, export it overseas, license it to competitors without my knowledge, that sort of thing. But I had always assumed it was theoretical, a safety net that would never actually be needed. Sandra continued. A reasonable argument could be made that terminating your employment specifically to avoid pension obligations constitutes a material breach of the business relationship spirit. You developed that technology while working there. They are using it to generate hundreds of millions in revenue. Cutting you loose to save pension costs while continuing to profit from your intellectual property could be seen as acting in bad faith. Would that argument hold up in court? Maybe, maybe not. Courts do not like subjective standards. Spirit of the relationship is hard to prove, but here is what would definitely hold up. The licensing agreement requires continued royalty payments, as long as Hartwell manufactures equipment using your patented technology. If they have stopped making royalty payments or attempted to invalidate your ownership, that is an unambiguous breach. When was your last payment? I thought about it. December. The Q4 payment came right on schedule. I had not received the Q1 payment yet, but it was not due until the end of April. Check your employment termination paperwork, Sandra said. See if there is any language about the licensing agreement. I found the severance package documents Douglas had handed me, a folder thick with legalese, standard release of claims language, non-disparagement clause, benefits continuation information, read through the whole thing twice. Found it on page 6. A single paragraph buried in the miscellaneous provisions section. Easy to miss if you were not looking. Designed to be missed. Employee acknowledges that all intellectual property developed during employment or related to company operations belongs to Hartwell Manufacturing, Limited Liability Company, and agrees to assign any outstanding claims to such property as a condition of receiving severance benefits. They were trying to take my patent quietly, hidden in termination paperwork like a clause nobody would read. Sign here to get your severance. By the way, everything you invented is now ours, Sandra, I said. I think we have a problem. No, Kevin. She almost laughed. They have a problem. They just do not know it yet. The next 2 weeks moved fast. Sandra assembled a legal team. Her partner handled corporate litigation. A younger associate specialized in patent disputes. Between them, they had more experience than Hartwell's entire legal department combined. I gathered every document related to the original patent development. The receipts showing personal purchases of equipment and materials. Bank statements proving the money came from my accounts. The time logs proving I had worked on the design outside of company hours. The dated photographs of my garage workshop showing prototype progression. The signed witness statements from my neighbor confirming he had seen me working on weekends and evenings. The original employment contract from 2002 that predated my patent work and contained no claims to independently developed intellectual property. That contract had been superseded by later versions, but none of them changed the intellectual property provisions. I had checked every time they asked me to sign an update. Always read the fine print. Always. The paper trail was bulletproof. I had been paranoid 15 years ago when I developed that technology. That paranoia was about to pay off. Sandra drafted a cease and desist letter, 16 pages of precise legal language. I read through the whole thing with her on a video call. She explained each section. This paragraph establishes your undisputed ownership of the patent based on original documentation. This section details the licensing agreement terms and history of compliance. This part addresses the attempted fraudulent assignment in the severance documents. And this final section is the kill shot. What is the kill shot? She read it aloud. Therefore, pursuant to Section 12, Paragraph 3 of the licensing agreement, Kevin Patterson hereby terminates said, agreement effective immediately due to Hartwell Manufacturing's material breach through attempted fraudulent acquisition of patent rights. Any continued manufacturer, sale, or distribution of equipment incorporating United States Patent 8234567 shall constitute willful patent infringement, subject to enhanced statutory damages of up to $150,000 per unit. How many RS-400 units did they produce last year? About 800. So if they make even one more unit after receiving this letter, they are potentially liable for $150,000 in damages. If they make 100, that is $15 million. If they keep producing at current rates, they will bankrupt themselves within 1 year. Sandra smiled. Exactly. We sent the cease and desist certified mail to Hartwell's corporate headquarters. Copies went to William Ashford, Douglas Brennan, the legal department, the board of directors, and Granite Peak Capital Partners General Counsel in Chicago. Then we waited. The first response came 18 hours after delivery confirmation, an email from Hartwell's general counsel to Sandra. Formal, carefully worded, requesting documentation supporting my ownership claims. Standard opening move. Pretend you do not know what you know until you see their cards. Sandra sent everything. The full package. 200 pages of receipts, photographs, contracts, and witness statements. Let them see exactly how solid our position was. The second response came 2 days later. My phone rang. Unknown number with a Chicago area code. Mr. Patterson, this is legal counsel for Granite Peak Capital Partners. We need to schedule an immediate meeting regarding your recent correspondence. I directed them to Sandra. She scheduled a video conference for the following Monday. Over that weekend, I did something I had not done in years. I went fishing, took my boat out on the lake, sat there with a line in the water, thinking about nothing in particular. My phone stayed in the car. The fish were not biting. Did not matter. I was not really there for the fish. Monday morning arrived. The video call included 6 people on their side, 2 Granite Peak lawyers in expensive conference rooms, Hartwell's general counsel looking nervous, William Ashford looking annoyed, Douglas Brennan looking like he would rather be anywhere else, and someone introduced as a patent litigation specialist they had retained from a big firm in New York. $400 an hour minimum for someone like that. Sandra and I were on our side, just us. Her from her home office, me from my kitchen table. William Ashford spoke first. Kevin, I think there has been a misunderstanding. We have no intention of claiming your patent. That clause in the severance documents was standard boilerplate language. It should not have been included in your specific situation. I did not respond. Sandra had coached me to stay silent and let them talk. The more they talked, the more they revealed. Douglas jumped in, trying to help. We are prepared to remove that language from your severance agreement and honor the original terms. The licensing agreement can continue as structured. There is no need for legal action here. Sandra leaned forward into her camera. Let me make sure I understand. You are acknowledging that Hartwell Manufacturing has no claim to United States Patent 8234567, that my client retains full ownership, and that the licensing agreement remains the governing document for any use of that technology. Yes, William said quickly. Absolutely. This was all a misunderstanding. Good. Then you will have no objection to signing an amended agreement that explicitly confirms those terms in writing. The lawyers on their side exchanged glances. The patent litigation specialist unmuted himself. His face was carefully neutral, professional. What specific amendments are you proposing? Sandra shared her screen. A document appeared. 23 pages of revised licensing terms. She had spent the entire weekend preparing this. First, explicit confirmation that Kevin Patterson is the sole owner of the patent with no competing claims from Hartwell, Granite Peak, or any affiliated entity. Second, revised royalty structure reflecting the current market value of the technology. The original 3% was negotiated when the RS-400 was unproven. 15 years of market dominance justifies a renegotiation. Third, audit rights allowing my client to verify accurate reporting of units sold. Fourth, a personal guarantee from Granite Peak Capital Partners that royalty obligations will be honored regardless of any future sale, restructuring, or bankruptcy of Hartwell Manufacturing. The silence stretched for a full 15 seconds. I watched Douglas Brennan's face go through 3 different shades of red. Those terms are significantly different from the original agreement, one of the Granite Peak lawyers said carefully. The original agreement was negotiated when my client was a valued employee with job security and pension benefits, Sandra replied. Her voice was calm, almost pleasant. Circumstances have changed. My client's leverage has changed accordingly. Douglas Brennan finally exploded. This is extortion. You are holding our production line hostage. No, Sandra said. Her tone did not change at all. This is intellectual property negotiation. My client owns technology that generates 40% of your portfolio company's revenue. You tried to take that technology through a fraudulent assignment clause hidden in severance documents. You terminated my client specifically to avoid pension obligations while continuing to profit from his innovation. If you would like to discuss extortion, we can add those facts to the public record when we file our patent infringement lawsuit. The patent litigation specialist leaned forward. Let us be careful about characterizations here. Mr. Brennan's comments were expressing frustration, not making legal accusations. My client does not care about characterizations, Sandra said. My client cares about fair compensation for his intellectual property. The terms I have outlined are reasonable. The alternative is litigation that will cost you significantly more in legal fees, damages, and lost production time than any royalty increase we are proposing. William Ashford held up his hand. Let us take a break. We need to discuss this internally. The call ended. Sandra turned to me on the side chat. They will counter, but they are scared. That litigation specialist they hired bills at least $400 an hour. They would not have brought him in unless they knew they were exposed. What happens now? Now we wait, and while we wait, they have a decision to make. Keep producing RS-400 units and risk $150,000 per unit in damages, or stop production and start losing money every day. They cannot fulfill orders. You think they will stop? Sandra smiled. I think they will stop within 48 hours. She was right. The counter came 2 days later. They agreed to confirm my patent ownership in writing. They offered a modest increase in the royalty rate from 3 to 4%. They rejected the audit rights and personal guarantee. Sandra rejected their counter. We demanded audit rights plus back payment of the Q1 royalty they had been planning to withhold, plus a 7% rate going forward. They came back agreeing to audits with limited scope, but not the guarantee and not 7%. We demanded the full audit rights and a personal guarantee covering at least 5 years of obligation. We would accept 5%. Back and forth, 3 weeks of negotiations, calls and emails and revised documents. During that time, something interesting happened. Hartwell's production lines went quiet, not officially. Publicly, they announced scheduled maintenance on the RS-400 production equipment, routine upgrades to improve efficiency, nothing to worry about. Orders would be delayed, but fulfilled within acceptable timeframes. But I knew the truth. Sandra had sent a follow-up letter after our first cease and desist. It notified Hartwell that any units produced after the licensing termination date would constitute willful infringement. Each unit carried potential statutory damages. They could not risk it. Every RS-400 system they built was a potential lawsuit, so they stopped building them. I heard about it from Tom, my former colleague, who had reached out after my termination. Called me on his personal phone after work hours. Kevin, the floor is dead. Nothing moving. Management told us it is maintenance, but nobody believes that. The RS-400 line has been dark for 2 weeks. Any word on why? Tom paused. There is a rumor going around something about your patent about you not actually signing it over to the company. Is that true? I did not confirm or deny. Just told Tom to keep his head down and not repeat anything he had heard. 3 weeks of zero production on their flagship product. Customer orders piling up. Delivery commitments being missed. Competitors circling like sharks who smelled blood in the water. I heard through industry contacts that 2 major accounts had already started conversations with other vendors about backup supply arrangements. The phone calls from Granite Peak Partners to William Ashford were reportedly getting more frequent, more urgent, more angry. They had bought Hartwell, expecting a reliable cash flow from the RS-400. Instead, they were watching their investment deteriorate by the day. The final agreement came together on a Thursday afternoon. Sandra called me with the details. Her voice was satisfied. They capitulated, she said. Full ownership confirmation with no competing claims. Royalty rate increased from 3% to 7% retroactive to the acquisition date. Quarterly audit rights with independent verification. Personal guarantee from Granite Peak covering all obligations for the next 7 years. And one more thing, what? Full pension vesting. They're going to reinstate your employment for the remaining 12 months, then allow you to retire with complete benefits as originally structured. You will be on paid administrative leave during that period. No actual work required. I sat down hard on my couch. They gave me everything. They did not have a choice, Kevin. 3 weeks of shutdown cost them more than your pension is worth. Customer relationships were deteriorating. Their projected revenue for the quarter was shot. Granite Peak's investment thesis for Hartwell Manufacturing depended on the RS-400 revenue stream. Without your patent, that investment is worthless. They ran the numbers. Paying you was cheaper than fighting you. So, they paid. They paid. The reinstatement paperwork arrived the following week. A formal letter from William Ashford acknowledging that my termination had been processed in error due to miscommunication between divisions, and that I remained an employee in good standing with all benefits intact. The letter was nonsense. Of course, everyone knew what had actually happened, but it gave them cover to reverse course without admitting wrongdoing. Let them have their face-saving language. I had what I wanted. I signed the amended licensing agreement. Sandra filed the necessary documents confirming the patent ownership and updated terms. The personal guarantee from Granite Peak was recorded and filed properly. Everything buttoned up. Hartwell's production line started running again within 48 hours. I heard they brought in weekend shifts to try to catch up on the backlog. Some of the delayed orders were filled at cost just to keep customers from leaving. Over the next year, I collected my salary without working, watched from a distance as Granite Peak struggled with the consequences of their own greed. The RS-400 delays had damaged customer relationships that took months to rebuild. 2 of Hartwell's senior engineers quit after seeing how they had treated me. They had reached out privately, asked me for references for other jobs. I gave them good ones. The company's reputation in the industry had taken a hit. Word gets around. People talk at trade shows. The story of the engineer who owned his own patent and shut down production became something of a legend in manufacturing circles. Granite Peak did not like that story being told. Nothing they could do about it. My royalty checks arrived quarterly. 7% instead of 3%, more than double what I had been making. The audit reports showed accurate unit counts for the first time since I could not remember when. Turned out they had been under-reporting sales by about 15% for years. That discrepancy alone added nearly $80,000 in back payments. On the anniversary of my original termination date, I officially retired. Full pension, full benefits. A small ceremony in the Hartwell conference room where William Ashford shook my hand and thanked me for my contributions with a smile that did not reach his eyes. I shook back. Smiled the same smile I had given Douglas Brennan 1 year earlier when he told me it was just business. Just business, I said. Do not take it personally. He did not laugh. My wife was waiting in the parking lot. We drove to our favorite restaurant for lunch, ordered the most expensive thing on the menu because we could. She raised her glass across the table. To patience, she said. To paranoia, I replied. Same thing sometimes. She laughed. 22 years of watching you organize receipts finally paid off. It really did. 6 months after my retirement, Granite Peak sold Hartwell Manufacturing to a larger industrial conglomerate. The sale price was reportedly 20% lower than their original projections due to customer attrition and competitive pressure during the shutdown period. The RS-400 remained the company's top product, but the damage from those 3 weeks had lasting effects. My licensing agreement transferred to the new owners automatically. The personal guarantee from Granite Peak remained in effect for the full 7 years regardless of the sale. The royalty checks kept coming like clockwork. I got a call from Sandra a few weeks after the sale closed. Just had an interesting conversation with the new ownership's legal team. She said they wanted to understand the licensing terms before they finalized the acquisition. What did you tell them? The truth, that you own a patent generating 40% of their newly acquired revenue stream, that the licensing agreement is ironclad, that any attempt to modify terms without your consent would result in immediate termination and production shutdown. How did they take it? Better than Granite Peak did. The new general counsel actually complimented the contract structure, said it was some of the cleanest intellectual property licensing he had ever seen, asked if you would be interested in consulting on future development. I laughed. Consulting? Apparently your reputation precedes you, the engineer who outmaneuvered a private equity firm. They think you might have useful perspective. Funny how that works. Last month I got an official letter from Hartwell's new engineering director. They were developing an upgraded version of the RS-400 and wanted to know if I would be interested in consulting. Market rates, plus a bonus for any patentable improvements. I wrote back with one condition. Any new patents developed during the engagement would remain my property, licensed to Hartwell under terms I would negotiate separately. They agreed immediately. First consulting session was 2 weeks ago, flew me out to the facility, put me up in a nice hotel. The new engineering team had already started on some promising concepts, but hit a wall with a thermal management system. Same problem I had solved 15 years ago with a different approach. Took me about 4 hours to sketch out a solution. They looked at me like I had performed a magic trick. The team lead, a guy named Bennett, who had been hired after the acquisition, pulled me aside after the session, said he had heard stories about what happened with Granite Peak, said everyone in the industry had heard, asked if the rumors were true. I told him the rumors were probably conservative. He laughed. Said it was nice to finally meet the guy who taught private equity a lesson about reading contracts. Second session is next month. They are already talking about a retainer arrangement. So, here is the final scorecard. Pension, $1.2 million in lifetime benefits. Fully vested, checks arrive on the 1st of every month. Royalty rate increased from 3% to 7%. That is an extra $180,000 per year compared to what I was making before. Back payments from audit discrepancies, $80,000. Turns out they had been underreporting for years. Legal fees, $45,000 worth every penny. Consulting income, $4,800 for that first session alone. More coming. Total cost to Granite Peak for trying to steal my patent. 3 weeks of production shut down. Customer attrition that dropped their sale price by 20%. Legal fees north of $100,000 when you count the specialists they brought in. Douglas Brennan's career. Speaking of Douglas, 4 months after the Hartwell sale closed, Granite Peak let him go. Official reason was restructuring. Real reason was that the Hartwell situation became a case study in what not to do. The senior partners found out his hidden intellectual property clause nearly cost them their entire investment. His position became untenable overnight. Last I heard, he was working at a smaller firm in Cincinnati. Significant step down. Someone who knew him said he had become very careful about reviewing termination documents. Now, William Ashford landed at another private equity portfolio company 6 weeks after Hartwell sold. Similar role, different industry. Some people fail upward. Tom, my former colleague who had kept me informed during the shutdown, got promoted to lead the engineering team after 2 of the senior guys quit. He called me last week to say thanks for the reference I had given him years ago. Said the new ownership was actually listening to the engineers for once. The patent litigation specialist Granite Peak hired never did any litigation. Billed them $28,000 for 3 weeks of meetings and analysis. Add it to the list. My wife and I booked a trip to Italy for next spring. First real vacation in probably 15 years. We are using the back payment money. Seemed fitting. The workshop in my garage is still running. Got a new project going that has nothing to do with sealing mechanisms. Just something interesting. No corporate entanglements. Just me and the problem. So that is the story. 22 years at a company, 1 year from pension vesting. A chief financial officer who thought he could bury an intellectual property theft clause in my severance paperwork. A production line that went dark the moment they realized what they had done. The cease and desist was 16 pages. The amended licensing agreement was 23. The smile I gave Douglas Brennan when he fired me was the same one I gave William Ashford at my retirement ceremony. Just business. Do not take it personally. They told me that first. I just said it back. Update. 3 months later, I got a few more developments worth sharing. The consulting retainer came through. 12 sessions per year at $4,800 each, plus bonuses for patentable improvements, plus travel expenses covered. The new ownership sends a car to pick me up from the airport now. Different energy entirely from the Granite Peak days. Ran into Patricia Davenport at a trade show last month. She had heard the whole story from someone on the board. She grabbed my arm and said she was sorry about what happened after the sale. Said she had had no idea they would try something like that. I told her it worked out fine, better than fine actually. She laughed. Said she always knew I was the smart one. Filed my first new patent last month. Variable temperature calibration system for the RS-400 upgrade. Patent will be in my name. Licensed to Hartwell, under the same terms as the original. Sandra reviewed everything, bulletproof as usual. Douglas Brennan apparently tried to get hired at another private equity firm in Chicago. They called Granite Peak for a reference. The reference was not favorable. Word is they specifically mentioned the Hartwell situation. He ended up taking a position at a regional manufacturing company in Ohio. Director of Finance, not Chief Financial Officer. Director probably reviews every termination document personally now. Tom called me again last week. Said the RS-400 upgrade prototype ran its first successful test cycle. Used my thermal management solution. Said my name came up in the leadership meeting as someone who should be recognized when the product launches. I told him recognition was not necessary. The royalty checks are recognition enough. My wife finished planning the Italy trip. 3 weeks, Rome, Florence, Venice, leaving in April. She has already bought new luggage. Says we should have done this years ago, but I was always too busy working. She is not wrong. The pension check arrived yesterday. $4,247 direct deposit right on schedule. Put most of it into the travel fund. The rest went towards some new equipment for the workshop, 22 years of keeping, receipts, 18 months of garage workshop development, 15 years of royalty payments, 3 weeks of production shutdown, 1 chief financial officer who learned an expensive lesson about reading employment contracts before trying to steal patents. They said it was just business. Turns out I am pretty good at business. This story is not just one person's experience, but a mirror reflecting a familiar reality. Loyalty is often expected, but not always returned. People are taught that patience and dedication will lead to security. Yet when profits are at stake, those promises can quickly disappear behind the phrase, just business. What stands out here is not revenge, but awareness. Instead of reacting emotionally, he relied on the value he had quietly protected for years, and in doing so, he broke a common cycle, where silence allows unfairness to continue unchecked. I think this is where it becomes personal for all of us. Setting boundaries is often seen as conflict, but in reality, it simply reveals the truth of a relationship. Respect that only exists when you are convenient is not real respect at all. So if one day your years of loyalty could be erased in a single decision, would you stay silent to keep the peace, or stand up for yourself, even if it changes everything?